Kyle here from All Media Reviews. So I want to do a few videos today. The first one here is just to talk about kind of what I can't help myself. I got my ginger citrus twist Waterloo, but the Minnesota Timberwolves. You know it. Yeah, I mentioned I did a video earlier in the year wondering how good they really were, and they were winning a lot, and then, you know, going into the playoffs, they ended up facing Phoenix, who had beaten them 3 times pretty handily, even though they were not. One was a back-to-back, second of a back-to-back, and then at least one of them was without without Karl Anthony Towns. But, I mean, they just kind of responded by just having their way with Phoenix in that first series. And now that they've played Denver twice in Denver, and you could say that, well, Denver, their series with the Lakers was tougher, and the Lakers played them pretty well, even though they beat them. And Jamal Murray had a few game-winning shots, but he didn't really play as well as he'd played. Denver's not, they weren't playing as well as the Timberwolves going into the series. Now, going into the playoffs, maybe, because Denver beat Minnesota toward the end of the season when it meant something, although the Wolves had beaten Denver only like a few weeks before that also. So it was like 2-2 during the regular season. But, you know, last season when Denver made their run, they said the Wolves were their toughest matchup, and they were pretty much. And the thing is, when the Wolves played them last year in the playoffs, they didn't have Jaden McDaniels or Naz Reid, and, you know, experience or whatever. But so the second game, I just, you know, like, it was pretty shocking to see that score at the half, 61-35. And without Gobert, too, which might have actually been to the Wolves' benefit in some ways, because Denver was thinking they weren't going to have to face Gobert going into the game after losing game 1. But I mean, part of it is they match up well, and they just play so relentlessly hard on defense that, and they continue it. I don't think Denver really was like prepared. Like when they played them earlier season, they played them last year in the playoffs. It wasn't like this. Some of it is just sort of a change and a different approach that the Wolves took. Is their inspiration from the injury to Chris Finch, winning it for him? Mike Conley's comments about, you know, he wants to get past the, you know, he doesn't have too many of these playoff runs left in him because he's his age. Was playing for Rudy and the birth of his child, his son, on Monday night, something to do with it also. I don't know. I mean, they're deeper. They have all these long defenders. I mean, it's obviously McDaniels. I mean, when Gobert's played, and actually Anthony Edwards. Although his defense, he's had some defensive highlights, but they don't focus and zero in on his defense as much probably as they could. But then you factor in Alexander, Naw, and Reed even, and it's a swarm. It's, you know, it's reminded me of, I mean, first of all, it's kind of a lot that first half looked like the Globetrotters versus the Generals. I was starting to literally kind of like, is this really happening? I feel bad for Denver that the games be played this way and they look almost helpless. Because you watch the Globetrotters and the Generals, it's like, you know, the Globetrotters are going to beat them easily, no matter what, because that's the way it is. But some of those, like, sort of very intense, like, thorough, very defensive teams historically in the NBA. The Pistons from the 2004 Pistons, the Ben Wallace-led Pistons that beat the Lakers and Shaq and Kobe, and the Pistons, the Bad Boys Pistons, when they had Dumars and Isaiah, Rodman, Mahorn the one year, Mark Aguirre. I'm trying to remember some of the other guys they had. I love that team that played perimeter defense. Although it was more of like interior and perimeter. I mean, Lane Beer, of course, but John Sally. They played collective. It was like a swarm. It was like a football team, like a rugby team. A swarm of like team defense. And they beat the Bulls with Jordan a few times, like 3 straight years I think it was, and then the Bulls finally beat them. And then that Bulls team with Jordan was not just Jordan, Grant, and obviously Scottie Pippen, and Armstrong. Some of the other guys they had on those teams were good. Cartwright was okay. Were good defenders of the perimeter. And then the later Bulls with Ron Harper and with Pippen and Jordan, they played the perimeter. And then Phil Jackson teams with Ron Harper and with Jordan and Pippen, and they had a few other guys too that were just long, very quick, very nasty perimeter defenders that didn't foul. Knew how to play defense without fouling. And then I would say the Phil Jackson Lakers teams with Kobe and Ron Harper. They had a few other. Robert Horry was another one. And then some of those Spurs teams. Now they weren't quite as intense. The Duncan, Manu Ginobili, Tony Parker teams, the later ones that won the last championship they won with Kawhi Leonard. That was the key, and that has often been the key. The what Garnett had said on Twitter about how the Timberwolves are like taking what the Warriors did and doing the opposite with defense. In a way, he's right. The Warriors, the Steph Curry Warriors teams of the last decade, stretched the game, the offense, in the fact that a 3-pointer you're open at any time to shoot it, and the frequency and the high, the percentage and the scoring went that much high up. It just became a perimeter game, and that's why a lot of teams have been playing 3 or 4 guards. The Timberwolves are responding. What the Timberwolves are doing, I don't know if they're the only team that have done it. As a response to that, they're saying, no, we're going to just pick you up outside at the 3-point line or outside the 3-point line, behind the 3-point line. We're going to defend you just like we're defending you right near the rim, and you're not going to be able to deal with it, because unfortunately, psychologically, the NBA has transitioned, evolved in a sense into thinking, oh well, everyone has to shoot threes and has to score, basically outscore teams mostly. I mean, there are some good defensive teams. Some of the teams that have won titles have had some good defensive players, but defense hasn't necessarily been there really since that '04 Pistons teams, maybe, or maybe the Celtics. I guess the Garnett Celtics, you could say, but they had Ray Allen and Rick and Paul Pierce, of course. So they still did win. I mean, Ray Allen was an unbelievable shooter. So this Timberwolves team, they may not win the NBA title. They may not even make it to the final, depending on what happens. But if they do, it's largely going to, first and foremost, because of their approach to defense, what their reaction, Chris Finch and his staff's reaction to or approach to and all adjustment to the mentality of teams that score from the perimeter. Denver's no exception. Porter and obviously Murray and Joker, they all hit threes. They're just like when the Wolves roster's that way. For the longest time, the Timberwolves never had anyone like Kevin Love could hit a 3, but we've never had a great 3-point shooting team, the Timberwolves. But we'll see. I mean, it's I'm gonna get ahead of myself. We've had 30 plus years of a drought for a major championship, unless we count the Minnesota Lynx in Minnesota here. But whether this ends up being like a sustained run, I mean, it could. But then again, what will happen is even if the Timberwolves were to win the NBA title this year, which that's so certain, if they get to the finals, even they're hungry. That's the thing, is they're more hungry than the Nuggets, but the teams in the offseason will figure out a way to adjust and try to play them differently but the thing is, with defense, you can't really do that well. If the Timberwolves were playing themselves, how would they adjust? I don't know. Because, first and foremost, if you play defense, it's just kind of natural. It's more of a coaching strategy standpoint rather than, it is execution to a degree, but not as much. I heard an analogy, it's like an offensive line in football. When offensive line is really good, there's really nothing you can do about it. They're going to protect the quarterback. So, I don't know. We'll see. I'm not getting ahead of myself, but it's kind of hard to believe that the Timberwolves, now that they're having all this national pressure, if they play Oklahoma City, if they win this round against Denver, and they play Oklahoma City, Oklahoma City is the higher seed. They'll have the home court. Oklahoma City beat the Timberwolves 2 out of 3 games. Granted, I think the Timberwolves are playing better now than during the regular season, when they were playing better than they have in decades, since the 2004 team with Garnett, Sprewell and Cassell. But I would say that the pressure will be more on them. That will be the first case, even though they won't have the home court. And if they play the Celtics, let's say the Celtics make the NBA Finals, I think nationally the pressure will probably still be on. It will almost be a push. Though the interesting is Garnett, of course, played with the Celtics and won those Celtics, won one championship with the Celtics and went to the finals like 3 times. Will he come back? Of course, because he hasn't. He has this feud with Glenn Taylor, and they haven't retired Garnett's numbers. And will he? Who if they were to play the Celtics in the NBA Finals, who would he be cheering for? Maybe he'll be cheering for the home team, which again the Timberwolves wouldn't have the home floor, but. I don't know, the way they're playing right now, the way that Edwards is playing now is like willing them to win and not letting them lose. The way their defense is right now, I just I may be drinking a Kool-Aid and having my homer bias, but I just really can't see them losing. Their defense, if their defense is as effective as it's looked in the first 6 games, they'd have to have just like a game where they they have a lot of turnovers, they get a lot of foul trouble, and turnovers are their 2 biggest Achilles heel. Or like an injury, of course, but let's hope that doesn't happen. But so, anyway, what's your take on the Timberwolves in the NBA playoffs? Are we getting ahead of ourselves, or is it the real deal? And again, we're going to get ahead of ourselves for is this going to be a thing where, because Anthony Edwards is only 22, the core of their team is only, the only guy in the Timberwolves that's old is Conley, really. Cat is like in his late 20s. He's been in this league for 9 seasons, but, and they've already signed him for a 5-year contract, and Reed's re-signed for a long. I mean, he could start for someone else, Naz Reid. These McDaniels signed a long-term contract. All these guys they've got in their roster. I mean, Rudy Gobert isn't quite too young, but they potentially could be around and have the same roster with a few pieces added over the next 5, maybe even 10 years. It's not everyone, but obviously the core: McDaniels, Edwards, probably Cat. And Naz Reid, maybe, assuming, some of the other guys too. I mean, Naw, I don't know if that guy's been just unbelievably good. I mean, Connolly and him for D'Angelo Russell, that was one of the best trades the Timberwolves have ever made, or in any team in Minnesota sports. So, but again, I'd be curious to hear your take. Again, we'll see. I'll probably make some follow-up videos depending on what happens, and it's just like drinking the Kool-Aid or just, whatever. But thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.